What's going on, legends? Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you've had an awesome day so far. Blight has been through many changes, and to celebrate this spicy killer, I wanted to make a video showcasing all of his changes. Everything from the short POV, J Flicks, Moonrushes, and many more, all the way up until the current day Blight. 4.2 marked the release of the Blight and the original set of moves that made Blight famous. To start, the original flick worked very differently than it does today. There was no restriction to how far you could flick in a single direction, as the turn rate was only updated each frame with no limit whatsoever. If you could turn your dude 180 or even 360 degrees in a single frame, you could lunge around huge corners to land some mind-blowing flicks on survivors. These were almost impossible to do at lower DPI levels because of this, and took a lot of practice and muscle memory to pull off perfectly. One other major difference is that these original flicks would lock your camera in the direction you flicked in, so correcting flicks was impossible. You had to be absolutely certain you had hit the right angle to score these flicks, as when you pressed the button there was no going back. Overflicking was incredibly easy to do with these older flicks, and you'd leave yourself in the open and give survivors a lot of distance if you performed one incorrectly. If you'd like to see a full game in action and how these were performed, check out my J Flick hand cam footage linked on screen now. The original Blight update also featured a much lower POV, which many players found harder and impossible to play with. Personally, I really enjoyed playing so low to the ground because of how fast everything felt, although it made seeing over medium height loops incredibly difficult. A more rare technique that very few Blights experimented with was the Moonrush, allowing you to rush sideways or backwards. These were unbelievably hard to pull off with consistency and were honestly more of a bit of fun than a viable technique, although I can confirm actually landing one of these resulted in the juiciest clips on stream. Effectively, to perform a Moonrush, you'd spin around very quickly just before you rush to then carry that velocity over to the Blight rush. One other thing that many people weren't aware of at the time was the differences between the original versions of the shoulder bump. By pulling back in the opposite direction and flicking very fast, you can actually increase the amount of angle you'd like to shoulder bump with, to the point of actually being able to turn around mid-rush and land some ungodly flicks. 4.6.0 was the release of Trickster, although Blight did get some major updates here too. The first and most obvious one was the increased POV, bringing his height from hag level to trapper level. This was an awesome change for many people who felt like his lower POV was unplayable and made it much easier to see over loops and tiles. They also completely reworked how his collision functioned, now using two different methods to detect whether or not a bump should connect with an object. Ultimately, this made many objects in the game significantly more slippery than they were before, which made the character harder to play, but also gave birth to the butter shack, as well as many other crazy techniques that would allow Blight to slip around objects for cleaner hits. 4.7.1 was a pretty huge update that introduced the maximum turn count for the Blight per frame and also introduced better functionality for Blight on console. A common misconception is that this update was introduced to remove the J Flick, although it was confirmed by lead developer that this was not the case and the update was there purely to level out the playing field between controller and PC Blight players. With this update, the original single frame J Flick and the Moonrush were dead, although it wouldn't take Blight players long to discover new techs and abilities. On the day the patch released, I discovered and coined the term Zed Flick, which will require you to flick multiple times to achieve a full 180. With a lot of practice, I managed to discover a way to perform these with only one mouse movement, allowing us to flick an almost instant 180 that was impossible to overflick and felt incredibly satisfying to pull off. Out of all the Blight flicks, these were my personal favorites and didn't require nearly as much raw DPI as its predecessors, so many more players could enjoy them. A new method was also discovered by some members of the community that by using an external macro would allow you to spin mid-rush and completely break the turning limits. This was known at the time as the helicopter tech, and although funny at first glance, was completely game-breaking and would inevitably lead to a fix. The 𝗧𝘄𝗶𝘁𝗰 was also discovered and popularized during this update, which would allow you to choose when to slide on an object by looking down, pre-turn harshly, and combine a flick on top to total a full 180-degree turn. 5.0 was the most recent update to significantly change flicks again, this time further limiting the amount of flick angle Blight could utilize. The single movement Zed flicks were wiped out, as well as the helicopter Blight exploit, although multiple flicks still exist in the game today as described in my Blight guide. The 𝗧𝘂𝗶𝘁𝗰 went completely unchanged and became one of the primary methods of hitting a 180 flick. On top of this, another new technique emerged known as the hug tech, which allowed you to begin a rush whilst already touching an object, sliding around it and hitting a survivor with much less time to react. The only main difference with this update was that flicks felt stiffer to pull off, which I'm hoping will be modified in the future as even players on console and low DPI were affected. That leaves us with where we are today. Blight has been through many changes, some for the better or some for the worse, but he still remained one of the most incredible killers behavior has ever created. I really hope you enjoyed the video. This is the first time I've made a video like this, so I hope it's a good one. Make sure to drop a like and comment down below to help out the channel, as well as subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on any awesome future videos we'll be releasing soon. Catch us live on Twitch with the link in the description. Stay spicy, and I'll see you all in the next one.